What if I told you that by simply changing the way you cross your T's or, loop your G's, you could physically rewire your brain to overcome trauma?
I mean, it sounds like magic, right? Or some kind of science fiction.
It really does. But according to this really fascinating stack of clinical texts we are looking at today, your handwriting isn't just like a mundane record of your thoughts. It is, and this is wild, a live physical electroencephalogram, like an EEG of your nervous system.
Yeah, it is a continuous physical projection of your biological state right onto the paper. Every loop, every slant, and every microtremor is a direct feed from your brain's most intricate neural pathways.
Exactly. So welcome to today's deep dive. We are thrilled to have you with us. Today we're unpacking an incredible collection of Spanish language texts.
Really amazing stuff. We've got a university thesis on social work from the University of Zaragoza, plus these clinical guides on a field called graphopathology.
And practical manuals on something known as graphotherapy. So the core mission of this deep dive is to explore the radical idea that your handwriting is a real-time monitor of your subconscious mind.
Right, and even more mind-bending, that by consciously altering your penmanship, you can actually alter your physical and mental health.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we can understand how changing our writing changes our brain, we have to look at how humans even realize that ink on a page reflects the inner self.
Yeah, to see how that works, we actually have to follow the historical breadcrumbs. Because long before modern neuroscience attempted to map the brain's plasticity, the ancients were noticing the connection between pen and psychology.
Wait, like how far back are we talking?
Oh, way back. Demetrius of Phalerum, he was an Athenian philosopher around 300 BC. He famously observed that the letter expresses the soul.
Wow. Which is a beautiful poetic thought, but I mean, it kind of stayed in the realm of philosophy for a long time after that.
It did, yeah. Until you get to the Roman historian Suetonius, who gives us a surprisingly clinical observation about Emperor Augustus.
Right. The sources note that Augustus had this very peculiar habit. When he reached the right edge of a page and a word didn't quite fit, he wouldn't just, hyphenate it or drop it down to the next line.
Well, instead, he would squeeze the letters together and wrap them with this strange stroke that his contemporaries called foxtails.
Foxtails, which is such a vivid image.
It really is. And modern graphologists look at that specific mechanical choice and see a distinct psychological mechanism at play there.
Like an inability to just let the word flow to the next line.
Exactly. The need to cram everything into the existing space is associated with the deep-seated fear of losing one's train of thought. It indicates a mind that struggles with forward planning.
So he was desperately trying to hold on to the present moment out of anxiety.
Yeah, the emperor was telegraphing his internal stress right there on the parchment.
That's incredible. So the clues were always there, kind of hiding in plain sight. But it wasn't formalized into an actual systematic study until, well, fast forward to France in the 1870s.
Right, with a man named Jean-Hippolyte Michon.
Yeah, he coined the term graphology, though from what the texts say, his system was a bit fundamentally flawed. Like he treated handwriting like a fixed dictionary.
Yeah, it was very one-to-one. Like if you have this one specific loop, you are definitely a liar.
Exactly. Which doesn't really leave room for nuance.
No, it doesn't. Michon was a pioneer, certainly, but his approach was overly rigid and, frankly, unscientific. The true rigor came from his disciple, Jules Crépusjamin.
Oh, I love his approach.
Yeah, he realized you cannot isolate strokes. He introduced the theory of resultants, which basically dictated that the meaning of a stroke changes entirely based on the context of the surrounding writing.
You have to look at the harmony, right? The vibration of the text as a whole.
Exactly.
I love this concept because it perfectly maps to cooking. I mean, if you just taste a spoonful of raw flour or like a dash of salt, it doesn't tell you anything about the cake you're making.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. But Crépusjamin said that if you take a graphic trait that indicates tenderness and combine it with a trait that shows a reaching out to others, that creates the overall flavor of a deeply kind, altruistic person.
Yeah, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And that holistic approach was a massive leap. It dragged the study of handwriting away from, parlor tricks and anchored it in the systematic observation of human behavior.
And didn't the French school build their entire foundation on something called the mimic law?
Yes, the mimic law. This is the psychological principle that writing is simply a highly refined microform of human body language.
Like body language, but frozen in ink.
Precisely the mechanism. I mean, think about how a person physically moves when they feel euphoric or optimistic.
Oh, sure. Their chest expands, they stand taller.
Exactly. Their gestures naturally move upward against gravity. In writing, the autonomic nervous system translates that exact same physiological expansiveness into upward ascending lines.
Oh, wow. So what happens if they're sad?
Well, conversely, if an individual's sad, fatigued, or carrying a heavy cognitive load, their posture droops, right? Their written lines do the exact same thing. They trend downward toward the bottom of the page, yielding to gravity.
Okay, but if handwriting is just a micro gesture, how does it capture the things we are actively trying to hide? Like, how does it map the subconscious? Because a blank piece of paper isn't just empty space, right?
Right. According to these texts, it's a psychological landscape. To understand that spatial mapping, we look to the Swiss psychologist Max Pulver and his concept of symbolic space.
Right, the cross.
Yeah, he essentially divided the blank paper into a cross. The top quadrant represents the spiritual realm, the intellect, conscious ideals, and authority.
And the bottom.
The bottom quadrant represents the material world, deep physical drives, instincts, and the unconscious.
Okay, and then horizontally across the page, what does that look like?
So the left side represents the past, the mother figure, introversion, and timidity. The right side represents the future, other people, extroversion, and forward action.
So you're moving from the past toward the future as you write.
Exactly. And the center, where the lines of the cross intersect, is the ego, the present self, trying to maintain balance amid all these competing psychological forces.
You know, I have to push back on that horizontal mapping a little bit.
Oh, how so?
Well, for you listening right now, think about how you naturally fill a blank page. Is this left and right symbolism actually a universal human trait? Or is the idea of left meaning past and right meaning future just a byproduct of the fact that we read and write from left to right in Western cultures?
That is a very valid critique.
Right. Because if you grew up writing Arabic or Hebrew, wouldn't all that symbolism just flip?
It is a highly debated point within the field, for sure. Pulver's defense, however, rests on human biomechanics rather than culture.
Biomechanics, how does that work?
He argued that the physical act of moving the dominant hand away from the center of the body, like reaching outward, is universally associated with moving toward others and venturing into the unknown future.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and pulling the hand back in toward the torso is a biologically protective, regressive gesture associated with safety in the past.
Okay, that makes sense. So regardless of which direction the language flows, the tension between the conscious and unconscious mind is playing out through the arm's extension.
Exactly.
And that brings us to what the sources call the deep law. This is the idea that when you first put your pen to the top left of a page, you are highly conscious. You're thinking about your spelling, your penmanship, the impression you're making.
You're on your best behavior, basically.
Right. But as your hand gets tired and as you get deeper into the actual message, your cognitive load shifts. By the time you reach the bottom right of the page, your guard completely drops. The true, unfiltered self leaks out.
And that psychological leakage is the core of what the German school, led by Raphael Sherman and later Honroth, called the emotional law.
The emotional law.
Yeah, we all familiar with the Freudian slip, the lapsus linguae, where a person accidentally vocalizes their subconscious thoughts. Graphology maps the lapsus calami, the slip of the pen.
Basically calling your teacher mom, but in cursive.
Essentially, yes. The emotional law dictates that the nervous system remains stable when writing about comfortable subjects. You write clearly, legibly, perhaps with an ascending baseline.
But if you hit a rough patch...
The moment you are forced to write a word or phrase that triggers anxiety, guilt, or fear, the autonomic nervous system spikes. This physiological stress instantly alters fine motor control.
So it visibly changes on the page.
Oh, absolutely. The writing might suddenly become microscopic, excessively pressured, descending, or just completely chaotic.
What's fascinating here is how Onroth summarized that exact reflex. He wrote, "When the mind doubts, the hand trembles."
It's so poetic, but it is a direct, measurable physiological response to internal psychological stress captured permanently in ink.
Which makes me think about the diagnostic side of this. Because if a passing emotional distress can leak onto the paper and distort the letters, it logically follows that severe, chronic mental or physical distress would leave a massive footprint.
And this brings us to graphopathology, the study of sickness showing up in ink.
Right, returning to that concept of the live EEG.
Exactly. When the nervous system is profoundly compromised by illness, the micromotor movements of the hand structurally reflect that compromise.
I want to make sure we conceptualize this correctly for everyone. It's not like an X-ray where a doctor points to a clear binary break in a bone, right?
No, not a
It's less like an X-ray and more like a seismograph during an earthquake. The pen is the needle, and any chronic tremor in the biological system, whether it's pathological narcissism or severe asthma, is going to dramatically swing that needle on the paper.
That seismograph analogy captures the mechanism perfectly. Graphopathology is looking for the tremors.
Like what kind of tremors?
Well, for example, the texts note that pathological narcissists tend to have massive, completely disproportionate writing. The ego demands space, so the brain overrides normal spatial awareness to dominate the page.
Wow. And what about psychopaths?
Psychopaths, on the other hand, often display writing that is rigid, static, and completely devoid of natural rhythm.
Wait, why does psychopathy look rigid on the page?
Because psychopathy involves a fundamental deficit in emotional resonance. Normal human handwriting contains microvibrations driven by empathy, hesitation, and natural autonomic fluctuations.
Oh, and they don't have that.
Right, a psychopath's nervous system doesn't experience those emotional vibrations.
Hmm.
The internal engine is flat, so their fine motor skills produce text that looks mechanically printed, almost like a robot wrote it.
That is deeply unsettling. But I can understand personality disorders showing up in ink. What about physical disease? Like if someone has a severe respiratory issue like asthma or tuberculosis, does the paper actually show that?
Literally, yes. With severe respiratory issues, the writing shows physical fatigue due to oxygen deprivation. You see a marked drop in pen pressure.
Just a lack of energy translating to the pen.
Exactly. Graphologists look for something called resting dots. These are heavy, unnecessary ink points in the middle of words where the exhausted hand simply had to stop moving to allow the body to breathe.
That is wild.
And in cases of tuberculosis, the sources document decreasing word sizes as the writer's energy violently drops. This is accompanied by massive, unusual spaces between lines, as if the spatial layout itself is gasping for air.
That is profound. The body is struggling for oxygen, and the spatial mapping of the text reflects that exact struggle.
The cardiovascular system shows up too, right? Heart issues are often characterized by what the Spanish texts call brasados.
Yes, brasados. They are tiny, almost imperceptible broken strokes within the lines of a letter.
Like the ink just skips, basically. When the cardiovascular system is compromised, blood flow experiences micro-interruptions. These tiny vascular hiccups cause instantaneous microspasms in the hand's fine motor control, breaking the flow of ink.
And what about high blood pressure?
With hypertension, the vascular tension translates into spasmodic, highly irregular, and sharply angular writing. The physical pressure inside the blood vessels creates aggressive pressure on the page.
And with neurological issues like Parkinson's disease or early dementia, the sources talk about torsions. And these aren't just the visible tremors you might expect, right?
No, a torsion is an unnatural twist in a stroke that should be straight. It indicates internal pain, either physical or emotional, causing the stroke to essentially wince or contort in agony.
Now, to be clear, the sources emphasize that a graphologist is not using this to replace a blood test or an MRI.
Definitely not. A graphologist is not a doctor. They cannot diagnose an illness.
Right, it is a functional warning system. It reveals that something deep within the organism is destabilizing, prompting the writer to go seek actual medical intervention. It's like the check engine light on a car's dashboard.
Exactly. It provides a prognosis, an early detection of biological friction well before systemic failure occurs.
Right.
The handwriting doesn't tell you exactly how to fix the engine, but it tells you it's time to look under the hood.
Here's where it gets really interesting. This is the absolute turning point of the deep dive, because if sickness and trauma change our handwriting, if a damaged brain sends signals down the arm that distort the letters, can we reverse engineer the process?
It's a huge question.
Right. If we force the hand to change its movements, do we heal the brain?
And this brings us to the reversibility principle. It's the absolute cornerstone of graphotherapy. It posits that the neural pathway between the brain and the hand is not a one-way street. It is a bidirectional loop.
Let's look at where this originated. Dr. Barillon coined graphic psychotherapy back in 1908, but the real breakthrough happened post-World War II, didn't it?
Yeah, with a French doctor named Trillat. He was working at the Claude Bernard Center in Paris with children who had been deeply traumatized by the war. Their writing was chaotic, fragmented, and full of fear.
So what did he do?
Trillat theorized that if he could patiently, methodically force them to impose order on their handwriting, he could force order back into their traumatized nervous systems.
Okay, I need to explain it like I'm 5 moment here, though. Wait, so if a trauma patient spends 45 minutes a day making us shapes instead of end shapes, their brain actually builds new synapses.
Yeah.
How does mere friction on paper trigger actual neurogenesis?
It comes down to the mechanics of neuroplasticity and sensory feedback. When you engage in voluntary, highly specific, and uncharacteristically slow handwriting exercises, you demand massive cognitive load from the prefrontal cortex.
You're fighting muscle memory.
Exactly. You are actively overriding deeply ingrained automatic habits. And this level of sustained rhythmic fine motor focus generates what neurologists call theta waves in the brain.
Theta waves, those are the specific frequencies oscillating between 6 and 12 hertz, right?
Exactly. Theta waves represent a state of deep neurological relaxation mixed with hyperfocus. It is a stress-free environment where the brain becomes highly receptive to learning and adaptation.
Oh, I see.
By sustaining this state through the physical friction of a pen dragging across paper, the brain is signaled to spark neurogenesis, the physical creation of new neurons, and the strengthening of calmer, more structured synaptic pathways.
So by forcing the hand to perform calm, organized movements, the tactile feedback loop literally instructs the brain to build calmer, more organized neural infrastructure.
That is the reversibility principle in action.
Wow.
To achieve this, the therapy relies on 12 universal geometric strokes, rotating clockwise and counterclockwise.
Yeah.
It is a highly disciplined practice.
How disciplined are we talking?
The text prescribed 30 to 45 minutes a day of continuous writing, and you must use a thick-tipped ballpoint pen.
Wait, why not just a pencil?
No pencils, because the graphite friction is too smooth. And no markers either, because you need the biological resistance of pressing down. You write on unlined, blank white paper, forcing your brain to constantly manage its own spatial orientation without a crutch.
Just to set expectations for you listening, you aren't changing who someone fundamentally is. If you are naturally an introvert, drawing loops won't magically turn you into the life of the party.
Right, it does not alter fundamental temperament. What it alters is character and attitude. The sources report it is incredibly effective at mitigating behavioral roadblocks like chronic stress, anxiety, and learning difficulties like ADHD, dysgraphia, and dyslexia.
It essentially removes the neurological static.
Precisely.
Okay, so if forcing the hand to perform structured movements builds structured neural pathways, what do those movements actually look like? If I sit down with a pen right now, what am I supposed to do?
Well, the clinical process begins with a baseline. The patient provides a spontaneous 2-page minimum writing sample on blank paper. It must be dated and labeled first free writing.
Got it. So a before picture.
Right. This serves as the initial diagnostic map, the starting seismograph that highlights the specific anomalies that need correction.
From there, the therapist guides the patient through 7 general exercises, which the manuals call the rules of gold.
The first rule is essential. Keep the writing continuous. The Spanish texts call it legata.
You want connected cursive. You only lift the pen for the absolute minimums like dotting I's or crossing T's. And here's a wild psychological mechanism from the text. If you forget to cross a T, do not go back to reconnect a broken line.
Yeah, the mechanism behind that rule is deeply tied to emotional regulation. Graphologically, the act of constantly stopping, reversing direction, and going backward to fix a minor stroke physically reinforces an obsession with the past.
Wow.
It creates a fear of moving forward. So by forcing the writer to leave the mistake behind and keep the pen moving rightward, you are neurologically conditioning the brain to accept imperfection and maintain forward momentum.
That is so profound. Rule 2. Keep the size of the middle zone letters, like A, O, and E, strictly between 2 and 3 millimeters. It forces intense spatial focus and regulates emotional volatility.
And rule 3. Maintain a vertical or slightly right-leaning slant. As we discussed with Pulver's symbolic space, leaning the letters to the right physically pulls your psychology toward other people and toward the future, combating isolation.
What about Rule 4?
Rule 4 focuses on controlling extensions. You are instructed not to make the tops of your L's or B's too high. Extreme upper extensions indicate a mind losing itself in impractical spiritual ideals.
And the bottom loops.
Conversely, you must not make the bottoms of your G's or P's too deep, which pulls the psychology too far into materialism or base instincts. The exercise forces the brain to maintain a grounded, balanced middle zone.
Rule 5 is visually my favorite. Favor garlands over arches. A garland is a curve that opens upward, looking like a cup or the letter U. An arch is a curve that opens downward, like a bridge or the letter N.
The biomechanical theory is that drawing garlands opens the hand and promotes altruism, receptivity, and vulnerability. Drawing arches is a closed, protective gesture that reinforces defensiveness, closed-mindedness, and ego.
Rule 6 teaches spatial awareness through margin control. You must leave a clear, organized margin at the top of the page, which the texts view as a physical representation of respect for the recipient.
Right. You must also prevent the right margin from becoming wildly disproportionate or crashing into the edge of the paper. That conditions the brain to recognize boundaries and anticipate consequences.
The sources claim some truly incredible benefits from this daily practice. We're talking about increased patience, self-discipline, reduction of fear, sharper memory, and remarkably, even physical benefits.
Yeah, the texts mention stronger skin, healthier hair and nails, and relief from asthma and bronchial issues.
Now, I have to act playfully skeptical here. Wait, so if I just connect my cursive letters and start making my G loops so huge, my skin magically clears up and I become a better listener? It sounds a bit like snake oil when you list it all out.
Oh, the skepticism is completely warranted. But we can ground this firmly in clinical reality by looking at the university thesis from Zaragoza.
The social work thesis.
Exactly. Social workers utilize graphotherapy within a framework called the task-centered model. When dealing with highly vulnerable populations, like someone paralyzed by severe anxiety or a child suffering from severe ADHD, telling them to just calm down or focus is completely useless.
Right, they lack the neurological tools.
Exactly. But giving them a highly specific, measurable physical daily task restores agency. Sitting down for 30 to 45 minutes a day, focusing entirely on the tactile pressure of a pen, regulating their breathing to maintain smooth lines, and consciously controlling fine motor skills. This is a profound, active form of behavioral conditioning and mindfulness.
It forces the body to relax.
It dramatically lowers the heart rate and drops cortisol levels. The physical benefits you mentioned, like clearing skin or reducing asthma attacks, aren't magic. They are the well-documented secondary biological effects of shifting a body out of a chronic sympathetic fight or flight state and into a resting parasympathetic state.
So, what does this all mean? Let's pull this entire journey together. From Emperor Augustus wrapping his words in foxtails out of a subconscious fear of losing his thoughts, to modern neuroplasticity generating theta waves through the friction of a ballpoint pen.
Handwriting is far more than just a utilitarian way to leave a grocery list.
It is a deeply intimate physical projection of your nervous system onto paper. It's a biological feedback loop.
It serves as a mirror that reflects the internal state of the mind, but crucially, it is also a tool that can mold it. The reversibility principle demonstrates that we are not entirely at the mercy of our subconscious traumas or anxieties.
We possess a manual override, and it sits right at the tip of a pen. Which brings us to a final, slightly provocative thought for you to mull over as we wrap up today's deep dive.
Oh, what's that?
Well, our sources meticulously detail the brain-boosting, emotion-regulating power of connecting cursive letters, of navigating symbolic space, and of feeling the physical pressure of a pen dragging across paper to build new neural pathways.
Right.
But look at the modern world we operate in today. We almost exclusively type. We tap perfectly uniform glass screens or press identical plastic keys. Every single letter you type requires the exact same amount of physical pressure, the exact same micro movement, and it yields the exact same standardized, emotionless font.
It really raises a profound neurological question. If handwriting is a rich, therapeutic, vibrant EEG of the human mind, adjusting and adapting to our deepest psychological states, is typing just an emotional flatline?
What parts of our brain are going dormant when we lose the slip of the pen? It makes you wonder.
It really does.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the hidden world of graphology and graphotherapy. We highly encourage you to go grab a pen, a blank piece of paper, and just write. See what your own hand reveals about you today. Until next time.